This is Kelsey Bino, and for my STRAND project, I chose the Geometry SOL 311 that says the student will identify and draw representations of points, lines, line segments, rays, and angles. So the first thing in my binder are the Unpacking the Standards, which includes the curriculum framework, the Unpacking the Standards, and the concept map. Then is the graphic organizer, which allows each student to define and draw each concept as well as write how it is read aloud and written. So this would be used after the initial lesson is taught on the overview of the concepts, and then a subsequent lesson has to be taught about labeling the concepts. So it could be used during that lesson. And here's my explanation of that on the back. Next is the folder game. So here's the explanation, and this is the folder game. So the students will use these two bingo cards to play bingo, and the cards are set up this way so the students can sit across from each other. On the back are their materials of the counters as well as the cards that have the clues on them for each math concept. So next are the tiered activities. So for above level, the students will play I Have, Who Has. And this is where each student in a group of 5 will have a card that says I have blank, who has blank. And the blanks will have 2 different pictures of math concepts on them. So for example, the game would be played as such. Sam would look at his card and see that he has a line segment, so he would say, I have a line segment. Who has an angle? And then whoever has an angle would say, I have an angle. Who has a point? And the game would continue in that way. For on level, the students will be given these strips of paper, and 2 of them have lines with arrows drawn on them, and 2 will have lines with points drawn on the end, so it wouldn't look exactly like this picture, but this is just to give you an idea of kind of what it would look like. So the students can then turn the paper strips to create each math concept. For below level, students will be given a long pipe cleaner, a short pipe cleaner, and a pom-pom, and a set of task cards with pictures of the math concepts on them, so then they will use the task cards as reference and use the materials to make each concept. Next are the integrated activities. So for science, we will graph temperatures. So the students will use this chart right here, and over the course of 5 days, we will, as a class, record the high temperature for each day. And then on the last day, we will take this data and plot it on this line graph here. So the students will be able to learn that you need a title for your graph as well as labeling the axes. So after we plot it, the students will discuss what trends in the temperatures were, such as were any days hotter or colder than the others, and questions like that. And then after this, we will identify what parts of the graph are made up of points, rays, line segments, and angles. So for example, the axes are rays because they start at a point and go on forever in one direction. It could also be considered an angle because these 2 rays meet at the same point. We will also discuss what element is not used and why. So for the next activity, this integrates social studies. So the students will create a map of the classroom. So the students will be able to explore the classroom and use a ruler to create their map. So they have to have a few things. In terms of objects in the classroom, they need to have desks, tables, and walls, but they are able to include other objects once they have finished the math part of the assignment. So this is the sheet that they would use, and once they have finished drawing the map in this region, they would color code each math concept. So for example, the student would see that, okay, this side of the wall, that is a line segment because it stops at 2 points. So he would highlight that green or whatever color he chooses, and then in the map key over here next to green, he would write line segment. That way, whoever is reading the map understands what color signifies what math concept. And that is it for integrated. Next is the lesson plan. So to begin the lesson plan, we would read the book Follow the Line Around the World by Laura Jungfist. And we would then discuss the difference between the line in the story and the line in geometry. And then once we have finished that, I would put big cutout pieces of paper on the board that are shaped as points, a long rectangle, and an arrowhead. So these pieces would be magneted and laminated so that they could be manipulated on the board. And as I'm explaining each math concept, I will create it with these materials. So for the next activity for guided practice, the students will use puzzle pieces to complete 5 different puzzles. It will look like this. And they will work with a partner to complete that. And then for independent practice, they will use a bookmark template, which will look something like this, to create a little reminder for themselves about what each concept means. So they're able to choose between naming the concept and drawing a picture, or naming the concept and drawing or writing the definition, or they can do all 3 if they'd like. And then for the close, students will complete a traffic signal exit ticket to identify how they are feeling about the concepts that were taught. For the assessments, the students will complete a KWL chart as a pre-assessment. So it'll look like this. This way the student will be able to identify what they know or want to know about each specific concept. And then for the formative assessment, I will collect their bookmarks and see how they did with those. And then the summative assessment will be a take-home test, which will look something like this, where the students will draw and define each concept, as well as find a real-life example in their home. And if they cannot find an example in their home, they can think of an example in the world, because there are 2 concepts that would be difficult to find in their home. Next are the assessments. So for the formative assessments, students will play Say It, Make It, Write It, which is a laminated worksheet so that the students can use dry erase markers on it. So here's the worksheet right here on the back. So for Say It, the students will write how they would say the math concept aloud. And then for Make It, they'll use pieces similar to this in order to create the math concept. And then Write It is where they will draw the math concept themselves. For the formative assessment, that's an exit ticket. So students will have to draw and name 2 of the 5 math concepts that we learned. And then for the summative assessment, students will do a project. So they'll have to make a visual aid with each math concept, including the name, definition, drawing, and picture of a real-life example. So on the back here is a rubric for the expectations for that project. And then here are the references. And that is my STRAND project.